startup addict. That's why I started the rehab. Starting my first company when I was 9. It was a Parrot factory.
In Russia. Business found you. I'm going to give you money. Just please leave me alone.
I had a catheter in my arm because I fainted and I was getting pulled out of the accelerator space while on a call with investors. You're crazy. When I was fundraising and I had over 100 VCs, over 70% hit on me in ways that it's, I will give you money if you sleep with me, or trying to drag me into hot tubs.
But you feminists, dude.
Yeah.
You try to make the world a better place so that things like this don't happen with next generations.
Where do I sign up for that?
I'm Natasha, and I'm making interviews with founders and just amazing women in startup space and all that. And today we're going to talk to Esther. She has built a few startups and actually introduced lots of innovations into the corporate world. So let's do it. Hello. So let's start with tell me about yourself, who you are, what do you do? What's your intro?
I am Ester Neznanova.
Okay, that's amazing.
I'm a serial entrepreneur, innovator, corporate innovator. I've done 5 startups. I'm a startup addict.
I love it.
Thank you. That's why I started the rehab. I also specialize in behavioral neuroscience, so I help people transform their habits. And I also am a very active meditator. I've been meditating for 20 years, and I teach meditation. I'm also an artist. I've been sculpting and painting, and that's why I came to Paris to sculpt.
I am honestly just surprised how many things on so many different levels. I don't even know where to go next. But actually, one of the first things that really made me interested is corporate innovator. What is it?
It's very interesting because yesterday I had a breakthrough with the project I'm doing right now, Founders Rehab. I was talking to one creative person about it, and she kept asking me a bunch of questions around how I am, what I am, because I'm helping founders recover from burnout. But the founders kept coming to me with crises. And I realized that for past, I'd say 15 years, all I've been doing is solving crises. So it's like solving crises in product, solving crises in corporations. A startup is just a nonstop crisis altogether. And so there is a certain, which we can talk about later, but I'm coming to realize more and more, knowing that I'm neurodiverse, that crisis is something that I strive in. I'm very calm in crises, and I'm very bored when there is no crises. And in the past, I remember my friends when I was a teenager kept telling me that I'm addicted to drama.
Drama queen?
I wasn't a drama queen, but I always had something happening around me. And only now, having studied neuroscience and neurodiversity, I realized that's a big part of me being autistic and ADHD at the same time. So I'm AUDHD because like we strive on dopamine and adrenaline.
Yes.
And that's why I kept creating situations. And then later on in my career, that became my thing where I don't have to have it in my life anymore because my work is just this constant intensity of crises. And it was very interesting to observe when I was in Los Angeles for 2.5 years, and there were the fires, and I jumped in, and within 3 hours, I set up a war room. No. 2 days later, we had 3,000 volunteers.
No.
Whee!
I feel that people who are serial entrepreneurs, that's exactly what they are. You start one thing, it gets good. Okay, it's not interesting anymore.
Yeah.
Anything else? And then you need to fix, solve. Okay, so let's go back. Tell me about yourself. How did it all start? Who did you start to be with? What did you study? How did you end up here doing sculpture and neurodivergent and also a startup founder?
Yeah, I was raised in Cuba, in Havana.
Okay, that's already generic. It's just, okay.
Yeah, it was really hard for me to understand what I was because I was part Russian/French, part, now I need to say that I'm part Ukrainian. And so it was all like the same thing back then. I was living in Cuba, and then I got kicked out of diplomatic kindergartens because I was a rebel. So I was raised by the community. I started with my mom, who was building systems in Cuba. She was creating community. And it was funny because when she was so mad at me for getting kicked out of kindergarten in like a month. Yeah, and she comes over to me, and she never yelled, but she's like, I can't believe you did this. What am I supposed to do now? And I'm like, Mom, but I'm just like you. She's like, yeah, I can't say anything to that. So I've always been different. I always stood out. My mom died when I was 7. I ended up in Russia after Cuba. during the fall of Soviet Union and the crazy 90s, where I was crying over not having my talking parrot and my mangoes and my bananas in the middle of insanity.
And no more questions about why do you like crisis.
Right.
Like you were raised in them.
I was raised in them, and basically like insanity happening in a very gray and unstable and hungry Russia. And I was just very confused because people around me talked my language, but they were just not like me at all.
Yes.
I always stood out and I was always bullied and all those things because I was just different.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because that combined with my neurodiversity of seeing things very differently. Ever since I was a kid, I saw things in like spider webs. I saw the interconnectedness that other people couldn't see. And I was very connected to nature and I like observing things, but I don't like engaging as much. I was just at a wedding in Normandy and people are like, oh, I thought you were stuck up and you're just an introvert. I'm like, yeah.
That's a very polite thing to say.
And I was like, I can be friendly, but I like observing much more than I like interacting. I started my first company when I was 9.
Oh my God. I was just about to ask, you decided to not to go to corporate, but no, at 9 you okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
It was a parrot factory.
In Russia.
In Russia.
Okay.
In Soviet
That's definitely the type of business that, okay.
It started in the most bizarre way because basically I missed my parrot. It was talking. So my dad, in the middle of starving Moscow, found me one parrot that was blue. The problem with blue parrots is that they don't talk. As a 9-year-old kid, I got bored very easy, and the parrot started getting depressed and stopped eating and all. So I was like, okay, Dad, we got to do something about it. And then he like pretty much sold a washing machine to get a second parrot. And he gets a second parrot that's a girl that's yellow. And as it goes, they're both bored, so they start having sex. And then I start getting more parrots and more parrots. And
Okay,
then
so pretty much business found you. You didn't expect,
did
but
find me.
sometimes business opportunities they just appear and that starts happening. Okay.
yeah, and I started selling it at school, and I sold it to a bunch of my friends. And then it was done because I couldn't just sell it at school. So then I went to the zoo, and I was like,
Wow.
who are your vendors? And they're like, this and that. I'm like, cool, I'll give you one for 40% off. And then I became the official supplier of a few zoos.
Honestly, I really hope you have it in your CV. That's a brilliant story. Okay, after the parrots, what was the next adventure?
Gosh, after the parrots, so that lasted a few years, and I made a ton of money. My parents found that under my mattress. They were like, what is all that cash? I'm like, oh, I'm selling
future investments.
Yeah, and then I left home when I was 16. I was really bored at school and I kept skipping class. Skipping meaning like moving to the next grade. It was very funny because I was considered a genius among the teachers and a weirdo among class members. I kept studying different stuff, and now I understand that I had like my hyper-focused stuff where it's, oh, I want to take up dancing. So like after 3 months, I'm doing it all the time, and I want to take up arts, and then I become a painter after 4 months. The same with sculpting right now. But back then it was a little challenging because I didn't realize why I spent weeks doing nothing, and then it's hyper-focus, and then nothing and hyper-focus. And then when I was 16, started doing like 3 businesses in parallel because that's what ADHD people do. And then I really wanted to become a chef because I really loved cooking because that was my love language with my great-grandma. But my dad didn't let me because I needed to go into management school.
Obviously, you know, obviously, I wanted to dance, and then okay, you do economics first, and then dance.
Exactly, and then you can dance.
I still dance.
I love that. Yeah. So what does a 16-year-old crazy rebel kid do? She figures out how to work with Michelin chefs without paying any money, and so
did you give them parrots? What did you do?
I went into Tupperware direct sales / MLM. I became an assistant to the vice president. I was hacking my way through university because I was really bored. I basically became first an assistant to the head of Tupperware CIS.
Okay.
And then I kept growing very fast. By 18, I was like, I want to do product development because I want to go to Paris and work with chefs. So I basically pitched her this whole like new department. And I was like, I'm going to do innovation and product development. We're the 3rd biggest market. So she said, might as well. And then a year later, I was living between Paris, Brussels, and pretty much like CIS countries, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and all of those. And I was doing product development. That's how it started.
How did it all move and change
But
for
as
the
a startup,
startups?
It was as a startup. So I was always a startup
okay.
inside a corporation.
Okay.
So for instance, when I ran innovation programs for eBay, I was the startup innovation hub in New York inside eBay. So I pretty much get hired when things get tough and when they don't innovate. So you can either buy a startup or buy a me, and then I'm going to build internal systems to have startups inside to be more innovative.
Why do you think those type of companies want to have startups within them?
Because otherwise they'll die. Most of them
I
have...
see many of them not realizing that.
Oh, they do realize. It's just that it's in the Disney method. There's creatives, there's project managers, and then there's critics. And I just wrote a piece about that, about the systems and corporations. So all corporations at scale become a pyramid system. And those at the top, just the way that the systems are built, those are at the top, they're actually not the best in their skill. They're the best at politics.
Yes.
And so what ends up happening is that plus all the incentives inside corporations, they're pretty much like short-term incentives. Sorry, SVPs, but like all SVPs care about is quarterly earnings, because that's how their bonuses
Or
are
the max
structured.
is, let's say, a few years in, because you know for how long you stay. So that's, let's say, the impact you care about, because then you know you're going to move to a new position after.
But it's mainly retaining the status quo and very much Game of Thrones level of an environment where I'm taking over more and more land to be secure. Google tried to change it and they're much better. I worked with Microsoft to change it and they're much better. But overall, like that's the structure that exists. Now, the problem with that is that it becomes a swamp. And so they can't innovate. That's why their what do you call it? Not shares, fluctuates. Their, help me with that.
Profit?
Not earnings, but their value fluctuates. And so what can corporations do? They can either hire talent for a lot of money, which is what we're seeing with AI right now, where Facebook is buying up for tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. They're buying up talent, or they buy a company, but buying a company or a startup is the same thing because they buy the talent in the long run. Because any product that goes inside a corporation, and I'm saying that with a lot of ownership because I've done a lot of startup acquisition deals and integrating startups into corporations, but every startup that integrates into a corporation is still a product that's going to change massively.
Yes.
So they need to buy that talent, and I'm one of those talents. The problem is that we're like this shining, cute star that ends up in a very political environment, and we're always a threat. Like I've gotten witch hunts, especially as a woman. The amount of witch hunts I've gotten in my first 6 months when I joined a corporation has always been insane. You pretty much know that you're there for 2 years. If they gold handcuff you, if you sold a startup for 10, 20, 30, 40%, then you have to stay there for 4 years. But you become that innovation hub inside a corporation because that's the only way that works right now.
So let's say you have been doing that for quite some time, and then you started your own project.
I've done both my own startups as well as corporate
What kind of
innovation.
startups? How did it work?
The first one, I was at Tupperware at that point, I think 6 years. I was head of product, and I realized that I'll get stuck in direct sales, so I needed to move on. And I ended up co-founding Digital Product Innovation Studio. It was between Moscow and London. I pretty much innovated with corporations. I was doing first Facebook games for the McDonald's and the Procter & Gamble's, et cetera, because I knew corporate, but I knew innovation.
Yes.
Well.
Oh, it's actually, okay, now I see that you are actually a very cool, unique niche where, from the both sides, that like you are not an outsider for them. You're still like a corporate part, but still very innovative. That it's, I think it's also the mindset that it's very...
And unlike a lot of founders who just hate corporations, I actually understand them because I grew up within them. And so I understand those systems, I understand status quo, and I understand why they want to maintain it. When I was younger, I was much more of a disruptor rebel that I am right now. Like I would go in and basically blow everything up and redo everything and then be surprised that everybody's freaking out. Now it's much more about balancing the system and doing the shifts in a way that's more caring and more gentle for long-term change.
Our work with startups, and I'm from corporate, and let's say now I work with startups, and I see people, startup founders, corporations are the worst. But guys, actually, you are trying to build something, you're trying to grow into something. So you cannot say that corporation is bad, because you all, in one way, trying to become one, maybe on a very small scale, whatever, 50 people, small corporation, but it's still the same story. They don't want to see the startup as something the same as corporation. But it's also just business. Like you cannot actually build it without sometimes doing.
I just had a chat with multiple founders, and it was funny because I was talking to one, and she told me, she's like, I don't know why, but our culture changed. We're now 70 plus people, and our culture just doesn't exist anymore. It's, because you grew and you're not intentional about building proper operational systems to support your culture, because culture is a product like your product. And it's funny because when founders talk to me about hating corporations, and I understand why they do that, I'm yet to see a startup that scaled that didn't become a corporation.
You can't. Maybe, I don't know, Lovable now, who are 10 people, or maybe 8 or something.
There's
see what
Signal,
happens.
who's like 5
we'll
people.
see what happens in a
There's
few
those
months.
guys. There's Telegram, that's still very small.
So after this startup, what was your next venture?
It got very successful, so I decided to make money. So I
Very good. Go, girl.
So I started another one and sold it. Got it sold within a year with my partners, and I thought I was it. Like I was 20, I don't remember, 4, and I've been head of product and we're running 60 plus PMs across 11 countries.
Oh my God!
And I've traveled the world, and I've started companies, and I was corporate innovator. And I've sold companies. So then I got offered a startup. And it was very interesting because I knew one of the founders really well and the other one I didn't at all. But that didn't matter, right? You can get married to a founder as a co-founder without knowing them, I thought. And so I ended up, because I was very crazy back then. So I pretty much chased first angel investor into Jack Dorsey, who's the founder of Twitter, who invested in Jack into 9 startups before Twitter. I basically stalked him and kept showing up at events and stuff like that. And eventually he calls me one day and he's like,
I don't want to see you anymore, so I'm going to give you money. Just please leave me alone.
But I was still very gentle. It was different. I know you're going to show up at the next event. Yeah, I will. So why don't you move to the Bay Area in 2 weeks? I'll give you initial funding and I'll put you in an accelerator. His name was Greg Kidd. He's one of my favorite, most amazing mentors. And I was like, yeah, might as well. I just bought an apartment. I just redid it. I have my whole life. But why don't I just move to the Bay Area in 2 weeks? So I did. And that was intense. Between 2009 or 10, I was the only woman in the accelerator.
What was the accelerator?
I'm not going to name names.
Okay.
I was the only woman. I ran a remote team. My CTO quit, so I had to hire a new one. And then I was working 24/7. I built the Hootsuite before Hootsuite. Built a social media management platform for Twitters and all of that, but we were way too early for the market. So I kept going.
If it was 2009.
And I kept going to corporations and I kept telling them Twitter, and I think it was 2010, I kept telling them Twitter is going to be the place where people are going to bitch about you, and you need to manage Twitter and you need to manage Facebook. And they were looking at me like I was crazy. And back then there was already a scandal with one of the airlines on Twitter. I forget which one it was. So they already saw that they need to manage it, but it wasn't an urgency. So it was too early for the market. The co-founder did not work at all, and I'm not going to go into details about that. He pretty much kept shaking the boat all the time and ruining my relationships with investors. So I picked the wrong co-founder at the wrong time, pretty much was too early for the market, and I crashed and burned. It was very interesting because that was my first crash, and I thought I was done.
What was your stage back then? What did you think? Okay, I'm worth nothing. I shouldn't
Pretty
have done
much.
that. I'm not doing startups anymore. I'm just go and get an office job. And what was
I
your...
was depressed because I thought that my reputation was just going to be
Okay,
over.
so pretty much was the
Yeah.
reputation thing.
It was the reputation, and I thought it was over. I was very surprised when the investors offered to invest in my next startup. It's like, but
Haven't you seen that?
failed. They're like, keep going. I'm like, I can't
But that's
keep
actually
going.
what I see now. They like that because it means you already did so many mistakes.
Yeah.
And you actually have first of all, the courage to continue,
Yeah.
to keep on going. And honestly, this resilience is one of the key things, I personally think. And point number two, you already made so many mistakes. You now know how to not make them. You can make new mistakes. That's fine. It's actually a benefit.
What they don't tell you is when you start a new company, when you're self-identified with a previous startup and the failure, without doing the inner work. And back then in the Bay Area, there was no money or options for inner work altogether. So you self-identify yourself, and we always self-identify ourselves with something, whether it's our external brand, whether it's our kids, whether it's our startups. And so once you cracked and crashed, and that's what I see in founders all the time, they keep going, but didn't do the work. So the next crash is even worse most of the time.
It's gonna come sooner and maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so then you somehow found yourself back emotionally.
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't.
I
okay,
did
this
not.
time you didn't.
I didn't at all. I was pretty much stuck in a country where I didn't know anybody, where everybody's self-identity in the Bay Area was about startups. And it's, what are you doing?
What is your startup? What's your startup and what's your startup?
Exactly, which is very interesting because in Paris, they just don't care what you do. They care about you.
Yes, and it's pretty much, I would say, it's somehow socially acceptable that you are an artist, you can be many things. While I imagine in Bay Area, if you're not in tech or startups or innovator, honestly, are you a janitor?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I was just back in New York on the 6 months. I took a 1-year sabbatical, and it was my 6 months in New York. And people were asking, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. Literally nothing.
I think that's all you need to have courage to actually say that. And it's to actually proudly say nothing. Enjoy life.
But the look of Americans, they're like, but you're doing something. I'm like, no, not really. I'm just enjoying my life. They're like, and they can't process it. Whereas in Paris, you talk to people and you're like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. They're like, oh, how did you swing that? How long are you going to do nothing? What are you actually doing? So it's a very interesting difference in cultures. Americans being so identified with what we do.
Yeah.
I had no choice because I pretty much, I needed to start another thing. So I joined my co-founder in starting Haka Labs back then. It was called Geek Talk, then Haka Labs. Now it's called Data Council, which was a community and a platform for developer evangelism and data engineers, data scientists, etc. We bootstrapped that. Bootstrapping was even harder than failing a startup, which is another thing that you don't talk about. Bootstrapping is the ultimate test on resilience in ways I've never experienced before, especially when you don't have the money to start with.
I think it's also this level of trust in yourself, self-doubt will be just jumping on you every second of your life if something not goes right.
Yeah, and the amount of stuff that you do, Airbnb was just getting started back then. So I was literally sleeping in my car, subletting my place on Airbnb so that I could pay engineers. There's a lot of hustling that has to happen, where you always find ways to get resources elsewhere while you're launching your business, which is actually not optimal for founders because they can't be 100% in the startup.
And then what happened with this?
It grew. On the peak of it, we had 1.2 million engineers on the platform. It was big.
So you didn't bootstrap for nothing?
No,
it worked out.
It worked out. And we ended up building developer evangelism brands for companies like Spotify and Bitly and Run the Runway and eBay was one of them, and a bunch of really cool startups. And that's also when I realized that I cared about diversity in ways that I didn't before. Before I moved to the US, I didn't realize just how bad sexism actually was. And I looked at the feminists and I was like, really? That's what you do with your life? Just so angry. Why are you so angry? When I was fundraising and I had over 100 VCs, over 70% hit on me in ways that it's, I will give you money if you sleep with me, or trying to drag me into hot tubs. I was like, oh, like that.
That's what you feminists do.
Yeah.
You try to make the world a better place so that things like this don't happen with next generations.
Where do I sign up for that? And like, why is that happening? Because it's not happening in Europe. So why is it happening here? Yeah.
After this startup,
I needed to leave just because I needed a green card, to be honest.
yeah.
And eBay reached out to me. I was doing their developer evangelism, and they reached out to me and they're like, listen, we have this accelerator, it's failing. We need an entrepreneur in residence. We need somebody who rebuilds it. You've built our community already. And the accelerator was focused on machine learning, artificial intelligence back then, and computer vision. And it was a nice way to do it. It was also a very cheap way to test all of my assumptions and mistakes without launching startups myself.
So you were a part of this accelerator.
I ran it.
Pretty much. Okay, you ran it.
I ran it,
So
yeah.
tell me from this experience, what is the big useful thing that startups or founders can get from accelerators? They can either make them or break them, pretty much.
I don't think accelerators can make them or break them. I think, and that's what I kept telling my teams, I actually needed to get an office for myself because the founders kept asking for different stuff, which is great. But I kept telling them, you create your own accelerator experience. I am not your nanny.
Okay.
I am not here to make your startup successful. You are. Whatever you get out of this accelerator is what you get out of it. And it was very interesting because some founders got everything, right? I got to introduce them to VCs. They got corporate partnerships with eBay. They got acquired by different companies, et cetera. And some just didn't. Accelerators are really what you make of it and how many times you ask for stuff proactively.
What did you do after?
It was a big success. I turned it around within 6 months, and then I started running innovation programs for eBay. So I did corporate partnerships with M&A with startups and rolled out programs in Shanghai and in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. So that was my first intense corporate experience, and I was the only female director in New York office.
Okay.
And it was
It shouldn't be so long ago. That's what I'm like, we're not talking about 19th century.
It was interesting to where I got to experience even more of America than before. So I started our diversity and inclusion chapter.
I think also was quite a bold move.
Yeah.
Only you as a woman, let's say director, see and feel the need for this. Everybody's like, why do we need that? We're all good.
Yeah.
Like, well, good.
And I had an amazing boss. That was pretty much it. It was a very intense environment. There's some stats about eBay's female director lifetime versus male. It was a very heartbreaking experience for me. As a neurodiverse ADHD person, when she sees a problem, she goes right into it. I kept trying to understand why. There was no reverence for women, no respect towards women, especially in tech, a lot of gaslighting and undermining. I was like, why are you this way? I went into neuroscience. I studied behavioral
Okay,
neuroscience.
that's like you. You're like, I see a problem, and now I go to study the brain.
And that's what I do. Like, I need to understand bias. Wait, there's 20,000 types of biases? Okay, give me all of them. Let me cross-reference.
Is there a real scientific explanation for this? Yes.
Yeah, there is.
That women, whatever, IT, tech, perceived less.
It's a human explanation of it, and we can talk about that if you want. I went deep into neuroscience, and and then I started talking to neuroscientists, and then I was like, we got to do something about it. And I ended up in behavioral neuroscience, reinventing products for diversity, equity, and inclusion in America. First with corporations, then with governments, then with startups and all of that. And everybody's like, she went into diversity and inclusion. I didn't go into diversity and inclusion. I went into a field that was interesting, which was human brain, human behavior, and human systems that didn't work for me. So I wanted to fix them because they definitely didn't work for me.
Over your professional journey, you actually changed industries quite a bit. If we're talking about product, did you actually find it easy for you? But also, did you find your previous experiences in other products beneficial for your next journey? Because, for example, go into neuroscience. We were just starting from completely different digital stories.
And it was interesting because I thought I was going to take a detour and have to climb back up. And then I ended up leading culture transformation, diversity, equity, inclusion practice for one of the biggest consultancies. And I like doubled in my revenue within a year. I was like, oh, so actually
you can do that.
I can do that. Okay, so I didn't have a choice. So I talk a lot about other types of systems that need to exist, and those are horizontals and verticals. And there's different types of people. So there's a lot of ADHD people among founders and a lot of neurodiverse people among founders.
I think because otherwise, I think it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work.
I'm
need
actually
like
studying
energy here.
You also need to look across.
Yeah.
And so there's really two types of a career, multiple, but like two main types of a career that we don't talk about. The first one is the vertical, which is I am a subject matter expert and I'm going to keep being a subject matter expert. The problem with it, especially in corporations, the vertical subject matter experts, they try to force them to be managers. And managers is not vertical, it's horizontal. It's going across.
It's a completely different skill. You might have it.
Most of the time. If they are focused on their craft, they can't be focused on people because they don't really care. It makes them unhappy when they start changing jobs, and then it's just bad. There's some that are good at it, and there are some that get too tired and just want advice. But it's a very small proportion, especially in tech specialists. Then there's horizontal folks. Some call them operations. I don't know what to make of you because your LinkedIn looks insane. But we fix things and work on systems, go across. We're the product owners. We're the product managers. We're the project managers. We're the COOs and the CEOs. And our skill is pattern recognition and ability to hold multiple things together.
That's about pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
An interesting thing here is that, and I talked about that, and I got tomatoes thrown at me 10 years ago when I talked about feminine versus masculine patterns, because historically, that is a more feminine pattern. Taking care of community and being able to see things across, also because of our safety concerns, and a much more masculine approach is direct. I'm not talking about men or women here, I'm talking about balance. A lot of women try to invest in things they're not good at because there's no room for actually having the jobs that they're good at. Folks default to chiefs of staffs, assistants, and whatnot, and that's just not it. So that's another interesting conversation that I discovered when studying the brain.
Do you think women are good startup founders? Is there any difference between women startup founders and male startup founders?
I think there's a more masculine and feminine approaches. I wouldn't say women or men. It was developed based on our survival skills. A combination is what works. So combination of being able to look across and see patterns and see things and hold together multiple sources of information and being able to go and directly attack a certain problem and laser focus on that is what makes founders good. The fun part is if ADHD is managed properly, that's what it gives you. If you can control and manage the hyper focuses and the wide and the kind of like laser focus, most people can't because they're being told ADHD is the problem. I don't think just one approach will work. If there's just laser focus, they can't really scale and expand. And if it's just scaling and expanding and looking wide, they often don't know how to focus properly on certain challenges. That's why diversity in startups matters. And when I talk about diversity, I talk about the basic diversity of skills, diversity of experiences. People generally try to attract people like them because it's more comfortable. And so I see a bunch of engineers starting companies and telling me how women shop. And I was like, you don't know how women, but my girlfriend. Okay. And so one of the things that I learned in running a startup accelerator is diverse teams performed so much better.
Yes, that's like a proven thing. It's harder for them to work together, but in terms of the output, the quality is so much better because they look from so many different angles. Another person doesn't even see, just see stuff differently. But it's actually so much harder to try to work in this more complicated.
So much harder. There's lots of data that talks about diversity being extremely hard and uncomfortable.
Yes.
And people don't realize that. And they still don't understand diversity at all, which is mind-blowing for me.
So let's say after that, you started your Founders Rehab.
No, after
Or
what?
did you have another burnout? Because I think we missed one.
had,
We missed one.
Oh my God.
We missed one.
I had two. I had a burnout after eBay, but that was an emotional burnout because I was struggling to get a green card, and that state of constantly being in pressure of not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, if you're going to get kicked out, going to get your visa renewed, all those things. And I had a very challenging process with the green card. I needed to apply for extraordinary abilities, genius green card straight away, which was very high risk. I just got severely depressed overnight, and I kept trying to figure it out. When I was studying neuroscience, and only a year later, I realized that I had PTSD. And so after I got the green card, my energy just went whoosh, because the body was like, well, we're at war, and now the war starts. Like that, now the war ended, so I'm done. I don't know about you, but I'm done, and I need peace, and I need a break. That was my first one where I actually took the sabbatical, and I took the time to recover and study neuroscience and understand myself way better. First one being like first one that I managed. It was a third burnout, and the first one that I managed. And then I had another one. I was running culture transformation programs for most of Fortune 100. And I talk about that in videos. And it was pretty much, I was running that. And during George Floyd murder, I was doing 20 listening sessions a week with African Americans, and also educating white folks on the experience and like, why are my employees not productive? And they didn't understand. So I was doing that. And then I was running culture transformation for a 70,000 people organization, where it was 37,000 of complete rebels with magenta colors based in Seattle and Portland, who just got joined with a Kansas Sprint. And for some reason, they were not happy. Why is that? The way the systems were put together and who was running it, it was very interesting because it was like, we gave product to T-Mobile because they're great at it. We gave customer service to T-Mobile because they're great at it. What do we have left? HR and culture. Let's give that to Sprint. Because
We have the cultures here. It's just a nice one to add on your like title, culture.
And Sprint was having layoffs every 2 years for 8 years in a row. People were extremely exhausted, and they were running culture. That made a lot of sense.
Exhaustion is also a culture in a way.
So that was very intense for me. And in the middle of all of that, the war started. Sorry, whatever we call it, I call it the war. I had to get my family out, and I had to get all of my friends out in hundreds and buy planes to fly to the war zone to be getting them out. I was advising startups where they had Ukrainian engineers and all of that. I, for some reason, crashed. It was very interesting because this time I saw it coming. I was also going through a separation, so it was all, and a move to Los Angeles.
Oh my
it was
God,
all together.
There's too many things. Like there should be some stability that you can actually live with. Okay, something is here that I can like hold on.
And that's where I was, and then the war started. But I got out of that very quick within 6 months just because I had the tools. I realized, oh, you're both emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. So it's all three components of it. And here's how we're working on it. And by the way, in 2 years, when the startup that you're advising and will join next, which was Product Science, like you're going to move on, leave, and have a year. So I created those flag posts for my brain to be able to recover from burnout much faster.
I think it's a very good thing to do. Have your own agreement with your brain for the future steps so that it knows the next step.
It needs stability. That's all it needs. It needs structure and it needs stability to feel safe. So then I did product science, and then a year later, then agreed upon. I basically took a break and have been doing Founders Rehab.
What is Founders Rehab? What kind of founders understand that they need rehab, and what actually is the product service that you give to them?
When founders come to me, they're exhausted and in crisis.
Why I ask this question? Because this is actually just a normal description of a founder being exhausted and in crisis. So that's the thing. Is there some kind of thing happening that they understand it's more than normal, or like it's actually...
It's either that or the tires have just run out. It's very interesting because I have two types of founders. This is the burnout program. You're burnt out. Yes, but I don't have time. But you're burnt out, but I don't have time. These are my priorities. But you're burnt out, but I don't have time.
I don't have time for this.
I don't have time for this.
I have this.
And
so I have go-to-market. I have this here.
And it was very interesting because my programs were not selling.
It's like an online program.
It's individual work and online programs as well. Like for folks who can't afford it, I've done online programs, except they don't sign up. They do now, but they weren't signing up because they didn't have the time.
And it was I think it's the same. The same, for example, in marketing. We don't have time to invest in marketing. We need to do that. It's, guys, you're not going to have time after if you don't do marketing before.
Yeah.
And it's just everywhere the same.
And it was very interesting because all the messaging was resonating, and yet they were not going through burnout mitigation at all.
Because I think it's also a lot to accept.
And it's funny because people are like, Founders Rehab, huh? What a cool name.
It's a cool name. It's a cool
name. Except I'm being very serious about it. As in, it is a rehab. You are addicted to your startup. You are a workaholic. You are addicted to dopamine. Hello. There's other ways.
That's exactly the culture. Like it's positive to be addicted to your work. It's positive to be a workaholic. Like it's recognized.
I was just commenting on one YC founder who was proudly showing how he was in the ER shipping a pivot. And I was like, really? I get it, because I remember I had a catheter in my arm because I fainted and I was getting pulled out of the accelerator space while on a call with investors. I clearly remember that moment. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, and this is the pitch, blah, blah, blah. And people were looking at me, they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, no, this is normal. And now looking back at what I did to my body, what I did to my nervous system, and the price that I paid, I now realize that wasn't normal. Moreover, I'm now surrounded by serial entrepreneurs who have kids, who have families, and they have a life. And actually, they're much more effective in how they operate.
In my experience, I actually find it's one of the key skills for successful startup founders, actually knowing when to say no. Yeah. Like just setting these strict, like personal and professional borders, it actually makes them so much more effective during the time when they say yes, because when it's yes, it's 100%. But when it's no, and they're not putting it here, it's not a mental task. No, it's just no. It's not their priority. It's not their level. No.
Yeah. Now, Founders Rehab shifted to Founders ER war rooms when founders just come to me with their shit and they're like, I have co-founder issues, I need help. And then they don't get help. And then 3 months later, they're like, I'm about to shut down my company. I'm like, you're not about to shut down your company. You still have co-founder conflict you haven't resolved. Or we're selling our company and one of co-founders doesn't want to sell.
So you're a professional psychotherapy for founders.
I'm a professional fixer. I actually fix stuff.
Okay, so you actually, let's say, find their problem and fix it from your experience and
from
all
my
that.
experience, I'm pulling in other founders.
So you're not just saying,
that have gone through
it's going to work out. It's going to be fine.
No, yeah. And that's the thing that I realized, that I actually have to do the work and my team has to do the work before we even help them recover. And it was very interesting. I was just talking to founders. It was cute. They came to me. They were talking in a very vague way. And they're like, acquisitions. Do you do acquisitions? I'm like, yeah, I've done a bunch of startup acquisitions. Like, I can help you prepare yourself for an acquisition. And they're like, great. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's explore that. I'm like, okay, let's talk next week. They're like, how about tomorrow? Oh, is there something going on? No, nothing is going on. Just let's meet tomorrow. And then I meet with them tomorrow. And then we talk about how to get a startup acquired and the documentation that's needed and the financial plan. They're like, cool, yeah, that sounds great. And it's now Thursday. I'm like, great, let's meet on Monday. They're like, how about Friday? I'm like, okay, guys.
10 a.m.
I'm like, okay, guys, what's going on? There's clearly something that's going on. I just need you to level with me. They're like, no, we're good. I'm like, yeah, no, I know you're not. What's going on with the financial? What's going on to where you actually need, you have some urgency. You clearly have a buyer. You're clearly not ready for it. But that's another cute thing about founders is we're always supposed to be superheroes. We're always supposed to super perform. And so often the founders that come to me, they're like a stray dog that kind of approaches you wondering if it's safe to be vulnerable and to actually share what's going on. And then they leave and then they come back and they leave and then they come back until they establish that trust. And it's very sad because they don't have anybody who's actually supporting them and who they can speak to openly without the fear of that spreading everywhere or their reputation being ruined because they're supposed to be perfect at everything.
Can you describe a startup founder who can succeed, like building his startup? What kind of characteristic or traits?
They come in so many forms.
Yeah.
I don't think that I can because there's so many external factors as well that people don't account for and often blame themselves for. I blamed myself for picking wrong co-founder. That was not okay. People make mistakes. I've seen so many founders rewrite history and say, oh, everything was so great and we found the product market fit and we got money and we got 10 million ARR in first year and it was awesome and then we got acquired. It's never that. It's always messy. It's always insane and 400 miles an hour. And it's a combination of luck and experience that can only be accomplished through repetition. So it's literally like anything. It's like playing music. It's like dancing. Like you try, you fail, you figure it out, you fail again, you try again. But then somehow in the startup world, we glorify the Evans, the founder of Snapchat, who just figured it out, or the Mark Zuckerbergs who just say, oh my God, he started it from his boardroom, his college room and dropped out. So now I need to drop out because that's the definition of success. No, it's not. You just keep creating startups and then eventually you make it or you don't make it. Like in music, like in arts, like in everywhere else.
It's like from all of your experience and startup experience mostly, give a piece of advice to build an amazing, awesome startup that works. What could it be?
I think the first one is you got to understand what your end goal is. Do you want to get acquired and make money? Do you want to become a billion-dollar company? Because building a startup to get acquired is not that hard. You just got to understand corporate, you got to understand what they need. And then you basically just create niche startups, multiple over rounds, and then eventually you get acquired. It can be 5 million, it can be 10 million, it can be 50 million, it can be more. And then you analyze the market, analyze what's needed. Like right now, if you're an AI startup, you're going to get acquired, most likely, if you're doing it right. I'm not talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, hardcore startups, just because of talent, mostly. If, however, you want to change the world, and if you want to build something you personally care about, then that's what you got to do. And then feeling what's right for you and not listening to external pressures is the most important thing. I think you cannot be a founder if you think that's going to make you money, because the odds of that are under 1%. If you are not resilient and if you are not okay with uncertainty, because the levels of uncertainty and stress is insane, completely insane. Another thing is not being attached to the baby, because
that's a good one.
Yeah, because so many people do not sell on time, do not pivot on time, I was just talking about that a few days ago when I was like, I'm mainly doing like emergency support for founders. Should I even keep the name Founders Rehab? And I was like, but that name is so good and I'm used to it. And it's been a year. They're like, yeah, you're attached to your baby. So that one. And then another thing is being a founder often becomes all encompassing if you let it. A lot of founders I know wake up in their mid-30s realizing that they missed out on family, that they missed out on things that they're passionate about, that they missed out on life. So it has to be a conscious choice, otherwise you're going to regret it. Because now I know that when I start a company, like it's either a baby or a company. But a lot of people unconsciously make that trade-off, and so then they get very unhappy, or they somehow think that they're going to succeed from the first go just because they've seen 5 founders out of thousands that did, and don't realize that the odds of that is under 0.1%. Oh, and pick your co-founder like you would pick your spouse / war buddy, because you're going to go through a lot together.
What's next for you? Now we know sculpture in Paris.
I'm actually prepared for an exhibition.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
you're full on again.
I know. AUDHD, sculpting, going all the way.
Are you still in the startup tech vibe?
Yeah, like I'm
So-
advising startups. I'm fractional COO and head of strategy to a few startups. I'm open to corporate I do startups, corporate innovation, culture transformation, and crisis management. If OpenAI reached out, they're like, hey, we want to build a new product. Sure. If a big corporation reached out, they're like, hey, we want to do this thing that's super innovative. Sure. If a small startup that I'm passionate about reached out and said they wanted to save babies, I would probably consider that.
I have a last question for you. What makes you happy?
What makes me happy? Knowing myself. I meditate a lot. I invest a lot in soul searching and growing that, like little Prince said, that rose inside you. I think that's my most important thing. And once I invest in that, then everything just works differently and aligns. I was most unhappy when I forgot that I was not my body, when I was like not my startup, when I lost touch with that soul aspect of me that is critically important for me.
No, I hope you're gonna have more happy feelings and moments of actually having yourself within you. Thank you very much for the conversation. It was very interesting.
Yay!
That's it.